If you're an entrepreneur who intends to grow and scale a business where you're going to have to hire people, it's really good to know what it's like to be employed. I think the biggest risk was that I took all my savings and put it into the business.
What's been the secret to your success?
I'd say it's hard work, determination, and clarity of vision.
Good evening and welcome to the Late Night Business. My name is Ian Dennis and I'm quite excited to host this particular show today because the guest that I have with me today is someone who has been there and done that in the corporate world and in the entrepreneurship world. And I have a very interesting story to share about the guest I have, and I'll just share about it in just a few. So before we get to start off the show, I'd like to just tell you where we are right now. We are at the Capital Club, located here at UBA Square in Westlands. You at the Capital Club is where every particular entrepreneur is supposed to be. And the thing is about the Capital Club is just an exclusive club. So primarily to be a member of the Capital Club, you have to be invited. And the interesting thing, regardless of where exactly it is that you're traveling at, or maybe any part of the world that you are in, even like my guest has been everywhere in this particular world, there's access to the Capital Club. So the guest I have with me today is probably, I can say, someone who has been instrumental to this particular media journey, and I'll just share the story in a bit. The show that I used to host before was called The Business Coach, and I have a very small. So the day I was shooting out the film, or rather I was filming up the pilot for The Business Coach, I was supposed to film with another guest. That guest literally cancelled for me in the last minute. And then I looked for India's number and I called. I was like, Wendia, I need you to help through this. And she came through for me, and I really, really appreciate for her. I really, really appreciate you.
I don't think I knew that story.
No, you didn't. And actually, it was.
You mean I wasn't your first choice?
No, actually, I tried to look for a number and I didn't get it.
Okay.
So when I was, what's it called? Once that particular guest bounced, I was like, okay, I tried again and I got it. I called you tonight.
That's how life works, huh?
Yes.
You just never know. And you've got to just
gotta
roll
with the flow.
Yeah.
So I haven't introduced you formally. I know you've done it all in the corporate world.
No, that's
you've
not
been
true,
a governance, you've been a
advisor.
governance policy advisor. You've traveled the world, and then when you got to 40, you decided, let me go to put everything aside and try to get into this particular world. But before I get into this particular conversation, I came across an interview that you had actually done before, and one of the things that you mentioned was that you attribute the woman you are today because of your parents. How was it for you growing up? Because I know you're born in Canada to a Canadian dad and
actually the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah, Kenyan dad
and then
Canadian mother.
Mom. Yes.
I mean, I think we're all shaped by our earliest years and by the people who raised us, in good and in bad ways. But I think a lot of the things I like about myself come from my parents. A lot of the things I struggle with about myself come from my parents. So it's in both ways. It's not all positive. But I think as you get older, you become more self-aware, and you start to look at yourself and wonder, why do I do things like this and other people seem to do it differently? One of the things that I'm very, very grateful for is my parents. And some of this I don't even think was by design. I think it was just by default. But my father was hardly ever home. He was a big drinker, and so he lived in the bar. And my mom was very liberal. And so I wasn't raised with a lot of conditioning. Like, I wasn't told, this is how you must behave, or you must sit like this, you must talk to people like this. So what I think it did was it allowed us to sort of become who we are. There wasn't a framework that we had to fit within, and because what I've realized sometimes is that with families that are very structured, the children's natural tendencies may not go in that direction. And so you're constantly fighting against who you are and who you're being told you should be. Whereas we were never really told who we should be, so we just evolved into who we were.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what would you say, because you mentioned there are two parts in terms of like the good part
and the
bad part. Let me start with the bad part. You mentioned dad was a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
How did it affect you growing up? And maybe what are some of the values that probably affected you?
Yeah, so I never, so one, he was a heavy drinker. Two, him and my mother didn't have a good relationship. So I never saw a good model of what, a loving, respectful, mature, intimate relationship can look like. And so I've spent a lot of my life looking for that and not having it ingrained in the back of my subconscious somewhere. So I think I've had daddy issues. I think I've looked for validation from men. And it's taken me very many years to sort of get to the point where I know now that I can never get what I'm looking for externally. Like, I have to be okay with the fact that I didn't have that as a kid, and that's fine.
And the positive.
Yeah. So and to me, to be honest, I think most things there's a positive and a negative of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So as much as that needing that validation has led to certain disappointments, it also made me very independent. It made me a go-getter because I didn't have sort of that fallback and people who were going to constantly tell me all the time, oh, here, hold my hand, do this. So I just had to go and do it. Yeah. I also grew up with 3 brothers and no sisters. I mean, I had to fight.
You're the only girl.
I had to fight to get that piece of chocolate, you know?
The last one or first?
I'm second.
I'm second. So in the middle?
I was, sort of in the middle. But it meant that I when I listen to a lot of women, especially in the entrepreneurship space, there's a lot of conversation around, as a woman, how do you operate in a man's world? How do you get into a room and find your space at the table? I'm like, I've been doing that my whole life. So that's not my challenge. I mean, I have many other challenges, but not that one.
Interesting. So you partly grew up in Canada?
No, I mean, I can't say that because we left when I was 7 months or 8 months old.
7 months.
Yeah,
and then
so I have
been in Kenya?
No recollection. So then we moved back. We moved back to Kenya for about 2 years. Then my dad joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and he was posted to the US. So I spent 5 years in the US, so from 2 to 7. Then we moved back to Kenya. Yeah. Then I was in Kenya till I was 17. And then I left to go to university. And then I've been coming back and leaving and coming back ever since then. So I've spent more of my life in Kenya than anywhere else. But I've also lived in many other places.
Having lived in so many different particular countries, because I know also you worked in across different particular organizations globally, how would you say that was an influence to who you are today, having that particular global view, and how is it important, probably even for someone actually watching this, if they can get an access to maybe travel and see how impactful is that for you, or has been that for you?
I mean, I think, the more places you go, the more you realize, number one, how there's so many differences, but we're also so similar. True. Like, people are people, so you can find ways to relate to almost anybody if you just look for the human side of them. I love traveling. I grew up not, when we were younger, we didn't travel much. And I went to a school with people whose families had a lot more money than us guys had.
So I used holiday to, in Australia.
So they used to go. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, we're off to London." Us guys were lucky if we made it to Kikambala. So I had this bug, and my mom had a travel bug that I never realized because she sacrificed so much for us when growing up. But as soon as she had a bit of freedom and a bit of money, oh my God, she does travels and travels. No, herself. She travels even by herself. She doesn't even need company. So I think that adventurous, curious spirit trying to find other places has just been always there. So yeah, I encourage anyone who has the chance. I think it opens up your world. It opens up your mind, and it makes it easier to relate, and to not have this view. Because I think sometimes, even when you see prejudices and things like that, it's because we're afraid.
True.
We don't understand, like, how is it you guys, even those guys over there, they do it like this. But if you actually go there and sit and be part of somebody else's way of life, you realize there's, it's nothing to be afraid of.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so something interesting about you, Jenny, you had a very successful career. And then one of the things that when you got to your early 40s, you decided to drop it. So first of all, before you even get to that particular entrepreneurship journey that you actually decided to forge ahead, what are some of the lessons that your corporate life actually taught you that have been important for you to get into entrepreneurship?
I think, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur who intends to grow and scale a business where you're going to have to hire people, it's really good to know what it's like to be employed. And to have a boss, and to have bosses who have bosses who have bosses, and to, to be the most junior or, you know, in an organization, and to know what that feels like, you know, to have, to be in a context where you don't really get to make that many decisions. You have to, and to have had many different bosses, I think I was able to see what, at least for me, which kind of bosses worked really well. What's the difference between a great boss and a not so great a boss? So I think that's been very helpful. Hasn't always translated to me being the best boss, but at least at least I know what it looks like. I can be like, oh my God, I'm being like that other boss, that other one. I think also just the structure and the discipline. You know, I worked for a long time in the development space where we had to manage projects, manage budgets. So I got very comfortable with spreadsheets, with presentations, with having deadlines and having to, you know, have that discipline to organize your time, to get things done, to work in teams. You know, so I had worked for over 20 years before I went into business.
And something very interesting is that I think there's not really a time limit to literally jump into, what's it called, into entrepreneurship. But you decided to jump in at a point where everybody thinks that life starts at 40. I think, and primarily maybe you had experienced, you're very comfortable.
I think life starts at 50.
You think?
Yeah. What do you mean life starts at 40?
That's what they said. Yeah. But anyway, you
50 is the new 40 now.
As
when
you grow older,
I get to 60, life will start at 60. Like life is now, you know, and it's never too late.
Interesting.
It is never too late.
What are some of the fears you had before jumping into it? Because primarily you already had kids.
I didn't have any.
You didn't have kids, but
I didn't have fears.
Oh, you didn't have any fears? Why? Or what exactly is going through your mind? I'm like,
I think it's that,
because you had a very successful job.
I think that's my personality, because I just dive into things, and I don't always, which is a good and a bad thing. I don't always think of all the possible whatevers. Yeah, I mean, you know, you also get to an age where you realize, as long as you're taking manageable risks. I mean, I don't believe in risking at all. Like, I wouldn't have sold my house to start the business. I'm a little bit responsible. I know some people. I know some people who have, and actually, it's been incredibly successful. But that's the rare case, you know. I think what I was more afraid of was staying in a career or a job that was no longer feeling satisfying or fulfilling. I mean, you know, the older you get and you listen to people who get towards the end of their lives, and they say that you'll regret the things you didn't do. You rarely regret the things you did.
True.
As long as you're making conscious decisions.
True.
But you'll regret, you'll get to 80, whatever, and you'll be like, why didn't I? And I am very clear that that's not the regret I want to have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And something that I had you talk about was that your job was well paying and you're very comfortable and everything was actually working out for you, and then you decided to jump to set up Vivo, and primarily it has taken you over a decade for you to literally even get to where you are.
I still haven't fully.
You still haven't fully gotten to
I mean,
what you're being
on
paid?
a salary, yes, but not, I mean, benefits. I was an expat. They were paying school fees, they were paying rent, they were paying, I mean, they were giving us air tickets, you know. I mean, there's no way I can get those sort of benefits, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I do have bad days, and I have moments where I'm like, why? What am I doing? Why am I here? But they're not that many. And I had many more days like that when I was employed, when I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I want to go to work today. You know, these days I don't have that.
Interesting. Take me through your early days. So
the early days in the business?
Yeah, early days in the business. Primarily, what's it called? Where did you source for the capital to set up? I know for a period, you had started off in the house. Just take me through your early days. How exactly was the early grind?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, when we very, very first started, we thought it was going to be an online business. There wasn't much of a huge investment.
That's back in 2011.
2009.
2009.
Sorry, 2010 is when we registered the company. So towards the end of 2010, early 2011, we thought it would be an online-only business. So that investment
and the internet was not as big.
It wasn't big. And which is why it didn't really work.
The benefits of traveling.
Yeah, it didn't really work. So when we decided that we would open our first store, that's when now we needed real money, because we needed to sign a lease, we needed to fit out a store, we needed to buy enough inventory, we had to hire staff. So the initial investment was about 10 million shillings, and that got us started. Most of that was from my own savings and a bit of money from my co-founder and two very early investors, who was my ex-husband and my brother. And that, by the way, took us through the first 4 years of the business.
Wow.
So from that money, we opened, and then the money that was generated from the first store helped us open the second store, and then the money from both of those helped us open the third and the fourth. So it wasn't until we were about 4 years in that we raised a bit more money now from additional investors.
Interesting. And in terms of just, because primarily, you know, let's say it grew from this stage to another, this stage to another. What are some of the challenges that you initially faced? Because primarily you're trying to introduce a new brand, especially in a country whereby we are used to either importing second-hand clothes or guys importing known brands. How exactly are some of those particular challenges in terms of you trying to establish a new brand in a world whereby everybody wants to have the Louis Vuitton, whether new or second-hand?
You know, I think ignorance sometimes is bliss, because to be honest, neither my co-founder nor myself had ever done this. We had never set up a retail business. We had no fashion background. We had never built a brand. So we just were like, let's do this. Let's try, you know. And I think I think luck plays a huge part of a lot of people's stories. I know in mine for sure. I think one of the luckiest things that happened to us was the initial space. So we were able to get a space in the Junction Mall, on the ground floor, in the new wing that people were kind of excited to come and see. And so when we opened it, everything was imported at that point, but we imported just random products from different parts of the world. But the big sign Vivo, I think people were like, oh, what's Vivo? Maybe they thought it was foreign. You know, they didn't know it was a brand we had just created. And because of the location, it got a lot of foot traffic. And so we didn't really have to do as much marketing. So my advice to anyone obviously looking to open physical retail outlets is location is really important. Not just which street or which mall, but where in the mall, where on the street, what are you near, you know, who's going to be walking past. Because that's how do you acquire customers? No matter what business you're in, you have to acquire customers.
True.
And so what's your strategy? Is it going to be going out there and shouting about it and then hoping people hear you, or are you going to locate yourself where there's already traffic that's coming? And so we were just very lucky.
Interesting. And now maybe from that particular experience, and because I know you always learn also from luck, what are some of, before you set up any particular store, what do you look at? What exactly are some of the checklists that you have?
So, you know, I mean, first of all, over the years, we keep learning what works and what doesn't for our brand. Right now, we've sort of identified the ideal sort of space size, so not too big, not too small. We look for, like I said, the location, strategic location within the mall. Is it near where people have to come out of their cars? You know, how many people will see it without having to make an effort to find us? So if you're hidden somewhere in a corner, you have to be a destination place. So if you're the only bank, in the days that people go to banks, I think that's changed now. But let's say you're the outpatient clinic. People are going to come to look for you because they're sick. That's where they're coming. Like clinics are not something you just are walking past and say, oh, there's a clinic, let me go.
I'm sick.
Why don't I just come in? Whereas sort of shopping for non-essential. Fashion is non-essential on a day-to-day kind of basis. Everyone owns clothes, you know. People won't necessarily come looking for you unless you've already built a brand and built a reputation. So I think those are the kind of things that you think about. We look at the catchment area, sort of who's there, who shops there, what are they looking for, are there products, I mean, do our products and our price points work for that? You know, it wouldn't make sense to go into a very high-end part of town with a product that doesn't appeal to that, or vice versa. We've been amazed. I mean, some of the things, and again, in some parts of the world, you can go to the local government office and they would tell you, this is the spending power in this part of town, and this is, the size of the population and the demographics and the profiles of this part of town. In Kenya, you can't get that data very easily. You have to sort of do your own work. And I think we've made a lot of assumptions around where the Vivo customer is. And we assumed for the longest time that the Vivo customer was in certain types of residential areas, and therefore they would shop at these malls, and because they're the ones who spend this amount of money. But recently we've started going beyond that, and now we have 2 stores in the center of town, and one on Mamangina Street, which we opened 3-4 years ago. It's doing really well. And then last year we opened on Moi Avenue, and it is wonderful. I mean, so Kenyans, this assumption that people who walk up and down Moi Avenue Street maybe will not spend or only want to buy secondhand. That's not true. That's not true, man. In fact, my research, when I walked up and down, I was going into stores next to where we wanted to open, and I was finding dresses for 10K, 8K. I'm like, my gosh, Vivo's cheap compared to that. If these stores, if they're doing sales, then people are willing to spend.
Interesting. And maybe just before we go on a short break, have you had to close any store during the period that you've been in business? And if you have,
so we've closed a few and we've relocated a few. So sometimes we'll get into a mall just because we really want to be in that mall, but the location or the size isn't ideal. And then if another space comes up within the same mall, then we'll say, okay, great, can we move? And that's a lot of work because you still have to fit out the new store as if it's a new shop. We've closed a couple because we've had opportunities to open close by in more strategic locations. But for the most part, we've stuck with the stores. I mean, like we now have 21 stores in Kenya, 1 in Rwanda.
And I know your target is 30.
Where were you? Were you in our management meeting?
I do my background check.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, the goal of this to end this year is to have 30. Let's see if we get there. But that's our goal. That's our goal. Yeah.
So we're going to take a short break, but after the break, we're going to extend this particular interesting conversation with Ndia Gishuru, who's the co-founder of Vivo Activewear. See you after the break. So welcome back to the show. So before we went on the break, I mentioned that Vivo Activewear, which primarily have been corrected, they changed the brand. It's now Vivo Fashion Group. What exactly informed this? We created a second business, Shop Zetu, which is a fashion marketplace, and then we also have Vivo Rwanda. So there are now 3 businesses. They all need to, be treated separately. And so we now see it as a group of companies as opposed to just one business. I think the name Activewear was also misleading because it referred back to what the initial idea was, which was to provide dance and fitness clothing and accessories. Still dance?
We still do fitness. We don't really do much dance at all anymore, but even the fitness is a tiny part. I mean, I would say 98% of what we sell is just fashion.
Interesting.
So fashion is our business. Shop Zetu is about fashion as well. We host over 210 brands that are fashion, beauty, accessories. And
what triggered Shop Zetu? Because I know initially when you mentioned the initial strategy in setting up Vivo was to literally have it as an online business before things on ground changed. So is Shop Zetu literally a reincarnation of what exactly was the initial idea?
I mean, it's Vivo 5.0 because it's an aggregator. And so what we realize is that in the fashion space, there are online marketplaces like Jumia, like Sky Garden and others that have fashion, but they're not necessarily brand driven. And it's like going shopping at a supermarket. Yes, a supermarket might have fashion, but you curate fashion very differently, whether it's in stores or whether it's online. And we wanted to give people the opportunity to go to one destination and be able to see a wide range of what's out there, be able to compare, to review, to see what people are saying about the products, and then have the convenience of shopping from multiple brands at the same time. So in places like the US and Europe, they're huge department stores.
True.
Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, they carry all these brands, and you can go into one building and you just walk from one corner to another, and you can shop from hundreds of different brands. So we've just brought that concept online.
Interesting.
And it's doing really well.
And primarily, because I know we're in an era whereby, what's it called, everything's digital first.
Yes.
And especially during COVID, that particular spike really went up.
Yeah.
So how are you managing or rather maneuvering within that particular space successfully? Because I know it's a good thing, but so many different brands have actually failed at it. So what are some of the nuances?
So one, I mean, when I speak with the Vivo hat on, I would say that for us, the two have to be aligned. You know, so people are experiencing your brand at multiple touch points, and you just want to make sure that experience, you know, is seamless. So what we find is that someone might come to a store, see something they like, look at it, try it on. I like it, I'm not so sure, let me check my budget. They'll go home and then they'll be like, actually, I really want that dress. And then they'll go online and they'll pick it. Or vice versa, they'll see something on Instagram, then that will prompt them to come into the store. And so I don't think it's either or, especially in fashion, because a lot of people still want to try things on. For Shop Zetu, what we really focus on is building trust and being the reliable, trustworthy platform. So if you shop on Shop Zetu and within a certain period of time you want to return it, automatically you get your money back.
How long?
I think it's within a week. You can return anything, you get your money back. And you can return it to a Vivo store and they will credit you back immediately.
It's interesting. Because I know it just only happens on roads.
No, listen, that when you shop online, as much as we try to help you ensure that it's the right size, we try to describe the detail of the product, you're still not 100% sure. You might get it and it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Why should you be stuck with that thing? You have to be able to return it. And I think a lot of times people are nervous to shop online because of the whole what you saw, what you bought versus what you get. You know, all of that stuff. Like, is it actually what? So we try to make sure. So for example, we vet the brands, we vet the products. We often create the content ourselves. So we know that image is the actual product you're going to get.
True.
And so for us, that's a key part of it. And what we see is that people, initially it's like they're just trying. I'm not going to spend too much money. Let me just place a small order, see what happens. And typically they'll come back. And the more times they come back, the more they'll be willing to spend, because now they know, okay, these guys. And it's not that we never mess up, but when we do, we try to own it and fix it.
Interesting.
And try and learn from it so we don't repeat those same mistakes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think earlier on, when you were talking about how exactly got into the business, you'd mentioned that you initially used your own particular savings and sourced fundings from in and around you. What's it called? Friends and family.
Yeah, and fools.
And fools. But you never call them fools. But anyway, something very interesting that also over a period of time, you've also had to raise capital for the business. How have you gone about it? And what's the process like in terms of just raising raising funding? Yeah. Apart from fools.
So for Vivo, we've stuck very much with friends and family. So even though we've raised a couple of times, it's from people who know us. Sometimes they've joined the board as an independent director, and then as they've gotten to know the business, they're like, oh my God, we like what you're doing. I want to be part of this journey, not just as a board member, but also as a shareholder. Shop Zetu, on the other hand, is taking quite a different path, because that's a tech company, and it needs a lot more. It needs to spend more than it's earning. Vivo has always been very traditional, and we manage primarily within what we're able to generate. And so that's a journey for me too. This whole talking to investors, talking to VCs, we've been relatively successful in that initial phase. We're just doing a pre-seed now, and we're doing it in stages, and we've been oversubscribed at every stage, which is exciting. And luckily there's a CEO of the company who's far better than me at at having those conversations and understanding. Because I think one of the things with raising capital, especially if you're raising from, formal investors, is you really have to understand them.
True.
Like, what is it they're looking for?
Yeah.
And does that match you and your vision? Because I don't think that you should design your company based on what the investor wants. You have to have your vision,
True.
your dream, your plan, and then find the investor who aligns with that.
Interesting.
As opposed to, because otherwise you'll be
You're
like
trying to
moving
shape the
from,
strategy.
So, and some people are I'm not a good salesperson.
Mhm.
Like if Vivo had required me to be the one standing at the store dealing with customers, we wouldn't be where we are.
No, that's a pitch you.
I'm like,
You mentioned something that you've raised capital for your pre-seed, and I know in terms of raising money, there are different, stages and phases towards it. Maybe we can just break it down for the viewers, especially because you've already had an experience out of it. I know there's Series A, Series B.
Yeah.
There's so many different particular terms that come out of it. Just break it down.
and again, I mean, I'm not the expert,
I know.
but
From
from my experience I used to think it starts at seed. Now I understand there's something like pre-seed.
Yeah.
And there are also very many different sort of frameworks or agreements that can be in place. So we've used something called a SAFE, which is security against future earnings, which means that you don't have to necessarily lock down a valuation per se, and you don't even have to formalize like share transfers and stuff like that until you do what's called a priced round, which may come at seed or it may come at Series A. So it would be typically it's pre-seed, then seed, then Series A, B, C, D. The size, the ticket size, the maturity of the business needs to keep growing from every stage to the next stage. The type of investors that would appeal to you. So there are a lot of investors who only fund at certain stages. So many of the investors who do smaller ticket sizes, take multiple risks with very many companies would be your early stage, would do a lot of pre-seed and seed. And those ones will spend a lot less time on due diligence. It's normally at a time where your business is just starting. Maybe it doesn't even have a product yet. It may just have an idea. I think for ShopZ2, one of the reasons that we haven't found it that difficult is because we already had. We'd already had product, we have customers, we'd been doing orders, we're already generating income. So people had a lot they could see. I think as you
raised for ShopZ2, you raised it locally or internationally?
A bit of both. And we I'd say about half local, half international. The further down you get and the larger the ticket sizes, the much longer those deals take to structure, the much more intense the due diligence will be. Then you have to like hire really good lawyers to be, to make sure that every
fine detail.
And at that point you're really having to be much clearer about your exit strategy. When are you going to get to profitability? And I think also, depending on the sort of investor ecosystem or the sort of economy and things like that, right now, investors are much more keen to understand your path to profitability. Whereas there are years where that wasn't. It was just how quickly can you grow?
Yeah, true.
And now that conversation is shifting. It's like, and then maybe there'll be a phase that the growth story will come back. But right now it's like, how, show us.
Where's the money?
When will you get to profitability?
Sure. And speaking about profitability, I know that once you set up into the business in 2011, by 2014, I think from what exactly I'd read, I know you're a private company and don't share the numbers, you're really making $1 million a year. How was it that you had such a quick rise? What exactly was it that you did to ensure that your business literally gets to pick up quite fast? Because we always say when it's a startup, within 3 years it's dead. Within 3 years you're making $1 million. How exactly was it?
In those very early days, I don't even think we had budgets. So it wasn't as though I can sit here and say, well, we had a strategy and we just followed everything and everything worked. I think for me, my passion has always really driven by getting a great product and offering an amazing service. And just trying constantly to see where can you improve, where can you, are you listening to your customers? Are you, you know, and if they're saying they want more of this or less of that, are you responding? And just being really proactive around looking for opportunities and jumping at them. You know, I'm a yes person.
Yeah. Always say yes.
Not always, but I say
times.
yes probably more than I should.
Yeah.
Which is why you got me that day when
I
your
know.
other when
And
your
I called
other
you, actually I called you at 7.
you know, I'm a sort of believer a little bit in the universe will be constantly throwing opportunities in front of you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know where that's going to go, you know? And if you can take that on, do. But I mean, obviously you also then have to manage your time. And so now these days I'm trying to be a lot more intentional about what I'll say yes to, what I won't. But so I think the speed at which we grew was really partly because it's like, oh yeah, exciting. That sounds great. Oh, there's an opportunity there. Let's do it. Let's go. About 5 years into the business, I think we were at about $1.5 million a year, is when I started to panic a little bit, because now the business had like maybe 6 stores. We were employing about 60 people, and we didn't have structures. We didn't have systems. I didn't have an advisory group. I had a very, very thin management layer. And I was just like, oh my God, you know, up until that point, I was still trying to do everything. I was the marketing, HR, you know. And luckily, that's when I came across the program that Stanford University runs, the Stanford Seed Program. And it was just like an answer to my prayers, because it helped me unpack all of the issues and really put a plan in place. And that so I did that program in 2016 and wrote a strategy that would last from 2017 to 2023. And even though we haven't followed it exactly, we are pretty much on track with what we set out to achieve in those 5-6 years.
Interesting.
So I do think having an idea of where you want to go, how you think you're going to get there, obviously that may change. And in the plan, the COVID years took us on a detour, but we're now back to where we thought we would be, even had COVID not hit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're still the CEO, 12 years in.
Yes.
You're still not relenting that particular seat.
I'm looking, man. I want to retire.
What don't you like about the job?
What don't I like? What I find difficult is not having enough time to get into every aspect of the business as much as I'd like to. I miss the hands-on thing. However, so what that says to me, as I even hear myself saying that, is that I struggle sometimes to let go and to really step into more of a leadership mindset where I am focused on the bigger picture and the future instead of the detail and the day-to-day. And I'm the kind of person who wants the detail to work. And so that makes it quite overwhelming.
And how you, because you know it.
So that's I need a coach to help me figure this out.
Speaking about a coach, you're also a life coach, actually.
I am.
And so
But you know, it doesn't mean that you can coach yourself.
I know.
You know?
I think we share the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a coach.
Okay. So I feel this is for me the constant sort of challenge and dilemma. It's sort of, how do you stay big picture and you know, and not get lost in the weeds? How do you let go and not micromanage? But you know, I love for me the experience of being able to sort of make the final decisions on a lot of things, to be able to respond quickly to stuff. You know, when you're employed, and especially if you're middle or lower and there's many layers above you, you can come up with a great idea, but by the time it's approved at all, you know, the opportunity is gone. Like someone else came and took it and whatever. Whereas, you know, I can meet someone today and they're like, "Hey, have you thought of da 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 da?" And if it feels right, I am a very good executor.
Yeah.
I can, in fact, I'm so quick to run that if I misunderstood,
you'll get it wrong.
I will be implementing and then it's like, what? Oh, you did? Oh, that's not what you meant? Like, what? I'm in the wrong city? Like, what? Yeah, so sometimes you pay a price for that because you don't necessarily plan it as well. But I think speed, I don't feel the need to be perfect.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to actually...
because sometimes if you're trying to be perfect, you'll move so slowly that the opportunity
literally
has gone. Yeah.
If you had to start all over again, what would you do differently?
I would be more... I would take a bit more time in hiring, in who you hire. I would have tried to identify much earlier the kind of culture and the kind of values that I want to see in the business, and then hire based on that. I think when you're starting up, you're so, first of all, you don't have much money, so you're just hiring whoever you can afford, and you're much more focused on looking at technical competence and skills, and those are important by you know, they're important for sure. But the character of people and why they're coming to work for you and what they're bringing, whether can they be part of growing a business that speaks to the values and the culture that you want to create. I think that's really important.
Interesting.
What else would I do differently? I wouldn't try and... So some of the mistakes I made in those very early days was I was trying to be... So I was worrying so much about money that sometimes I was making very poor financial decisions.
Oh, no.
So when I was buying importing product to sell, I would speak to the supplier and they'd say, "Sawa, you want this dress? If you buy 10 pieces, it will be $20 each. But if you buy 100, it will be 15. But now you don't know whether that dress is going to move. But I'm just looking at 15 versus 20. Let me buy 100 or 200. And then it would come and it doesn't move. Now you're stuck. So, you know, sometimes that initial cheap can be expensive.
True.
If you don't have the enough confidence about how something will work, or even how, let's say, even how you finish, you know, the kind of finishing in your store, let's say.
True.
If you go for the cheapest option, you'll have to replace it in 6 months. And then you're disrupting things and whatever. So it's that kind of thing. So sometimes I feel I was trying to be prudent with a spend in the moment, not necessarily thinking about how that may cost us down the line.
Interesting. So before we even get to wind up, we have 90 seconds. We're going to do a quick fire question.
I'm so bad at this. Okay, let's go.
So whatever comes to mind. So I'm going to go through 10 questions.
Okay.
The first question: what's the greatest risk you've ever taken?
Oh, you see, I'm not good. I have deep answers for everything. You can't give me a question like that and give me a rapid response. The greatest risk. Can I skip?
You can skip.
Okay, I may come back to it. Sorry,
back to
I told you I'm bad at this.
What's your favorite month?
Yeah. December.
Why?
Holiday. Time with family, friends. I typically go down to the beach. Yeah.
What's your favorite word?
Word, love.
What time do you usually go to bed at night?
Too late. After midnight.
This question actually fits you. Describe your style in one word.
My style? Varied.
What has been your favorite age so far?
Now.
Interesting. What is one of your nicknames?
Yadi.
Interesting. What item is worth spending money on?
Books.
If you could afford any car, which one would you drive?
What is it? A Jaguar.
And then maybe we can go back to the first question.
The biggest risk?
Yes.
I take risks all the time. You know, I don't want to give you like a cookie cutter answer. I would say starting Vivo, but I didn't feel like it was a big risk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe it was. I think the biggest risk was that I took all my savings and put it into the business.
All your savings?
All my savings.
So if it could have gone south, it would have gone south.
I wouldn't have gone south because I can turn around and make money. I mean, I'm employable, or I was then. Maybe I'm too old now, but
You said the greatest time is now.
No, it's true.
Thank you so much for just having graced us. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think we can go on and on. It's literally close to an hour.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Goodness,
Time flies when you're having fun.
It's always, yes, it's been a great conversation.
So when can I want to interview you. Have you ever had the table turned? Can we come on your show and I interview you?
You should, that's a good idea.
Yeah?
Yeah, you should.
Okay, let's plan for that.
Let's plan
I'll
for
wear
that.
a tie.
This time around. And remember the suspenders.
And suspenders.
And then you'll have to suspend the show. You know, my dad jokes. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for having watched the Late Night Business. My name is Ian Dennis. You can actually follow up this particular conversation across our social media handles that are running below the screen, at KTN Home, at Ian Dennis Network, across all particular social platforms. And once again, thanks so much to the Capital Club, the place whereby all entrepreneurs are supposed to be. It's a place whereby there's a point you get in life whereby you need to be invited for things. So when you keep on growing through your business, you should be invited to the Capital Club, whereby you can have access to so many different amenities. My name is Ian Dennis, and this has been the Late Night.